right, good evening. I call this meeting of the Budget Committee to order. This meeting is being held in person. The public is invited to watch live on the city's YouTube channel, Comcast Cable Channel 30 in the city limits, or via Zoom using the link on the meeting webpage. There will be opportunities for the public to speak during the community comment time. Written comments may be submitted by email to finance@milwaukieoregon.gov. When it's time to take public comments, staff will monitor the comment cards and email inbox. We will take comments in the order they are received and seen. Spanish translation services are available upon request. The public is asked to request translation services at least 48 hours before the meeting. Translation services are also available in other languages. So, as usual, we begin with introductions. I am Leslie Schachner, Budget Committee Chair.
I'm Lisa Beatty, Mayor.
Mary Rose, citizen member.
Will Anderson, City Councilor.
Emma Sagor, city manager.
Jennifer Garbely, city engineer.
Peter Passarelli, Public Works Director.
Michael Osborne, Finance Director.
David Cheatzazon, citizen member.
William Johnson, citizen member.
Robert Massey, Council President.
And online, I believe we have Councilor Kosarabadi. Councilor Kosarabadi, can you hear us and can you unmute?
Yes, thank you. City Manager Say. Adam Kosarabadi, City Council.
Okay, so the next order of business is the approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any comments or corrections to the minutes from August 26th, 2024?
I do not. I do not have any corrections. If there are none, I will move to approve.
Wait. Then I want to say something.
Oh, okay.
Okay, which is that I actually submitted some Scrivener's error comments to grammar and sentences and so on, which Michael and Emma have looked at and agreed they're just, edits, not changes to the text. So having said that, I'll entertain your motion.
I move to approve the minutes with the Scrivener's errors corrected.
I second the motion.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. The next is that our
Admin fee for that. Other SDCs that we do are on a bi-yearly basis to Wes that we pay in March and September of every year. That was the big question that came away from last meeting. Going forward in this, we have Matt Deeds, our Assistant Finance Director, back there, and he's tracking all questions as they come up for next time. So we do a better job of following up.
Any questions? Further questions?
I don't expect you to have the answer to this, but it's something I'd like to know, I guess. Is there something in an agreement, and it's probably a Justin question, but is there something in an agreement that commits us to the monthly transfer to NCPRD, or has that just been our practice? I'd like to know that just for the future.
I don't know specifically, but we can follow up on that. I imagine it's paying them on a timely basis, and we just use the monthly process for that, but we can look into it.
Okay. No one else has any other comments? So at this point, we will open the meeting to any community members that would like to discuss any city business with the committee. Those wishing to speak that are not at City Hall, please email finance@milwaukeeoregon.gov or raise your hand in Zoom by dialing *9. You can also write a comment in the Zoom chat to indicate you would like to speak. Before you make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. If you would like the city to follow up with you, please submit your contact information to finance@milwaukeeoregon.gov. As the committee has other business items on the agenda this evening, speakers will be limited to 3 minutes each. Because the information provided during the community comments may be new, staff will respond at the next committee meeting to those comments that require follow-up. And I have a speaker card from Elvis Clark of Milwaukie, who wishes to speak on the general fund stability. And I believe he also submitted an email, which is in the record.
Just hit the button on the microphone. There you go.
Okay, Alvis Clark, I live in Ardenwell District, Milwaukee. I submitted a written comment, as you saw there. I wanted to comment that also orally that urban renewal is running at odds with the need to grow our general funds for a growing population. For example, the 7 acres apartment complex in central Milwaukee has added to Milwaukee's population by about 240 persons or more. Yet the property tax increases from this new complex are going not to meet the increased basic service needs of these added people, but instead to urban renewal aimed mostly at downtown amenities, public amenities. Basic service and its primary source of funding, property taxes, should be and is supposed to be the primary function of city government and this body. It may be rather mundane purpose, but it is the primary purpose of government. Urban renewal had not much to do with the 7 acres increase in property improvement. Back in August of 2016, when the urban renewal became adopted by the city council, I recall there was being an agreement with the fire district that there would be a reassessment of the financial draw on the fire district for Milwaukee's urban renewal plan in 15 years or less, or 15 years. And given the sluggish state of the growth in the city's general fund, that review should happen, I think, now. Cuts are needed in the urban renewal programs, such as withdrawing central Milwaukee from the urban renewal district and restoring these properties to fully funding the general fund. I also recall from sometime by the early 2030s, Milwaukee urban renewal will have a draw on general fund property taxes reaching $1 million a year. It is now $275,000 according to Clackamas County tax assessor records. And this is up sharply from last fiscal year. I have to recall these things because the documents, the original document, I go to the redevelopment commission website and I hit on the documents, the founding documents, and they came up with nothing there. So it might be just a technical problem, but I was trying to look for those documents today and I couldn't find them. I mean, it would come up not there. And I go back to the council agenda for August 2000s and in that time frame, and those come up not there. So probably a technical glitch, but I couldn't find those documents. Anyways, that's my chief concern, is there's some way to balance better balance the general fund with the urban renewal goals. That would be, I think, in good keeping and would make property tax increases, any that come, more palatable, at least to me. And I can make those arguments. Anyways, thank you for listening.
Thank you. And staff's going to follow up on the documents, right?
Will do.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anybody online that wants to speak?
Chair Schachner, I see one attendee online. They do not have their hand up. If that attendee does want to speak and wants to put their hand up, please do so now. Otherwise, we'll move on. I'm going to drag this out to see if they put their hand up. I don't see a hand going up.
Okay, Then, moving on, we are going to have City Engineer Jennifer Garbely give us a CIP update. Did I pronounce your name right? Oh, good.
Thank you all for having. Really hard to estimate exactly how much you're going to spend by June 30th, especially when we set this budget back in like March. So we will have some funds from last year that will need to move into this budget that weren't spent as of June 30th. So that'll be coming. We received an SS4A grant. So it'll also be in the supplemental because that project isn't listed in our CIP currently.
What is SS4A?
Safe
Streets.
Streets for All is a federal grant. This is for the Harrison Safety Assessment. Part of it is part of the Logos 40th and 42nd project. So basically, because we got this grant, I'm going to be kind of breaking that project up so we can do this project on 42nd with the federal project. This will allow us to submit dollars to get a roundabout at 42nd and Harrison, along with going from King Road, intersection 43rd, towards 42nd, down to Harrison, and Harrison all the way to 99E. This assessment will then set us up to go out for implementation dollars, in which we can try to get all of that funded through the federal grant process.
So it's a planning grant?
It is a planning grant. We're getting $320,000 and we're putting in $80,000. So I'm using dollars from the Logos 40th, 42nd to fund our match of that project.
And I have to say, you know, we always hear how slow the federal government is on everything, but we got this grant in about 2 or 3 months. I mean, it was really from the time staff submitted they brought a letter to council to submit a letter in support. And from the time that went in to the time we got the news was really not very long. It was great.
I filled out the agreement. It's looking like I'm just waiting on them at this point to approve it. It's a shorter application for that even. We submit when we've spent the money each month. We can submit them an invoice and they'll pay 80%. So we end up it's a nice, easy way to get through a federal process, which is
You don't have
amazing.
to wait a long time to be reimbursed, it sounds like.
No. So January, and hopefully we'll have the 2025 done by June 30th, which is pretty exciting. We'll also do a second slurry seal project. That's also underway right now. We're kind of just doing our due diligence, figuring out what streets we're gonna slurry seal for next year. And I hope to also have that done by next June 30th. We'll see, but it's looking good. This program is using budget residential surface repair. So this was a new bucket I created in order to start paving some of our residential streets that are not in our SSMP program. We got a really good bid too, so I'm excited for this next year.
When you say this was the new, was this the $100,000 that got put forward, or no, this is different?
That, I think, is the SPOT program that
Oh, okay.
I think you'll talk about. And are you talking about that,
I'm
Jenny?
not talking about it, but I can talk about it. The residential service repair has 500,000 each year, so $1 million total. And then we also tap into sometimes the transportation maintenance program bucket as well, which has another $1 million. So depending on projects, what need fed, whatever's left over, I'm using in this grind and inlay project. I will go out for another $1 million project is my goal. So we get another 2 miles of street surface in our city completed by June. We'll see what the budget comes in, but I'm estimating around $1 million. Last year, we got a bid for $940,000. So really nice.
And can I clarify, Jen, for context?
Sure.
How many total miles of streets do we have in Milwaukee?
60.
Okay, So 2 miles is significant. Yeah.
It's a start.
Yeah.
We still got a lot to go, but it is a start. We're looking at residential at the moment for those streets that I'm looking at, right? We'll have an update to council on the SSMP and SAFE program next month, so.
So when you say there's 500,000 a year, is that gas tax money? Is that the county VRF money? Is it some mix of?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it comes from our transportation fund.
Yeah, okay.
So, it wasn't at capacity, so we were able to slip line it and maintain a much smoother pipe through there. It's a corrugated pipe, failing, not doing so hot. We were able to pull in now an HDPE pipe, and it's working fantastic. We're about 6 months ahead of schedule. This project's supposed to be anticipated to be done in fall of 2025. We're actually looking at spring. So it's moving along quite nicely.
Can I just give some kudos to the city here? I live right on 30th and I pass by the Blue Store quite often. And the sign that you've put up with the Blue Store is still open for business. I really appreciate it. As we're thinking about our hubs and our little neighborhood commercial facilities, inevitably we're going to have transportation projects. And so I love to see the way the city has already been working together with those businesses.
I wish I put it up sooner. We didn't think about it until we got to the next phase. Right now we're in water work and then we're coming right by that Blue Store. The PRV was supposed to be installed actually right outside and got really nervous with it, that old building. So I actually moved the PRV 2 spaces kind of down in front of another house.
What's a PRV?
I'm sorry, pressure reducing valve.
Oh.
So right at that intersection is actually where 2 of our zones interact. And right now we're using a valve that just keeps it closed. And a PRV will allow from the upper zone to feed the lower zone when that lower zones get too low of pressure. So it's another way of boosting up our system and being able to move water within our city from one zone to another. So yes, more signs when businesses are there are fantastic, and that was a great one. We're also gonna have a pilot article actually going out with a little notice that, hey, the Blue Little Store is still open, come see it. Ardenwald North, I know we've talked about this project forever, but guess what? We got a bid, it was fantastic. And the CIP is about 4 million. We have a budget authorization of 3 million. Pretty exciting, actually having a little savings there. This is gonna be done by Landis & Landis, who's also doing Washington area improvements. So I think that's one reason why we got a great bid is they're already working in the area. So it was a nice way to have the contractor be able to work at both sites. They are anticipated, I think, to be done next fall with this project. We're hoping they get started probably next year in January or February. We haven't received a schedule yet, but this does have ARPA dollars on it. Some of the savings came from the water and wastewater. So we do have some additional funds that we're looking at spending to make sure we don't lose those ARPA dollars. And we're probably gonna spend those on a Stanley Reservoir and do some extra items for that project that we won't have to spend in the future. So. Ardenwald is some sidewalk improvements, storm, sanitary, and water, so a lot of utilities. This is a shared road concept, so it's not a separate sidewalk, but it is making the surface better. It's mountable curbs, so there's still parking on the side streets. And that mountable curb helps bring that stormwater to our drainage system.
And it drains into that, whatever it's called.
Catch basins.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
we'll be-
catch basin over by the railroad tracks. Is that it?
It will make its way down to Roswell
Eventually.
eventually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. A lot of our catch basins in that area are undersized, so it's actually bringing those up to code. They're too small, so actually they're doubling the capacity of those drains to be able to capture that water more
I didn't
efficiently.
even know about that Roswell catch basin until it was discussed the last time, and so I drove over and looked at it. It's like,
Yeah,
it's pretty big.
it is big, yes.
Yeah.
Downtown sidewalk and storm. We talked a lot about this one as well. It is going out to bid in the next month. So right now, all the documents are submitted into Bonfire, which is our new bid procurement website. And we're excited to move this forward. This project is definitely using a new technology for the city, some silva cells, also with some porous concrete. The silva cells allow underneath the sidewalk space for tree roots to grow. The porous concrete allows water to drain through it and basically feed your trees that are in the area. So new trees will be going on. This is the block between Monroe and Jefferson, right in front
Both
of.
sides?
No, this is just one side at the moment.
Okay.
However, I've got a new staff person who is looking at the rest of Main Street. And we have some URA dollars to spend. And so we're looking at a project to improve trees and sidewalk along Main Street. So that'll be, it's moving forward, Mayor. But anyways, this one's just from in front of the Collectors Mall, and I think the next building over. That sidewalk is pretty bad, and we're testing out this new technology to see how we like it. Yeah,
Sorry. Question on the just sidewalks in general. And I have a 2-month-old baby, so I might be forgetting this. Almost 3 months, sorry. But I remember on the redevelopment commission.
board involved, went through the process of, hey, what should we do here? And everyone came up, well, we need to provide better space for the trees to survive.
Mike, if you can mute your microphone, Peter can chime in too.
Yeah, thanks. Just to add on to what Jen said, so I think, this case in particular, we decided and came to council, I think back 18 months ago, 2 years ago, probably, and with this opportunity to test out these silva cells to see how they worked in the downtown environment. There's an added expense that would be above and beyond sort of the general expectation for an adjacent property owner to spend. So we wanted to look to see in a downtown area how this would work with trees when we plant trees. As you can see through the downtown, there are various places where tree roots have impacted sidewalks, unfortunately, and we think this is an opportunity to try out this technology that's been used in other places, right? So-
Awesome. Okay, great.
In addition, the owner has already replaced that sidewalk like 8 years ago.
Oh,
So
wow.
it has got 8 years worth of use and it was already buckling and causing it. So we were citing him and he's like, what do I do? I
So
need to take out
8
these
is-
trees. I want, okay, let's relook at this and see what's a good solution.
Gotcha. And so it's generally a lot, because I don't know the year time frame, that 8 years is pretty quick. It's usually more like 20, 30, I don't know.
50?
50. Oh, okay, good to know. Yeah.
And
okay.
I think the other thing here is that the city planted the trees. I mean,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
if a landowner planted the tree
Yeah.
themselves,
Okay.
then the responsibility might be different.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
here, the city.
No, yeah. And I'm for the record, just like all in favor of, like, everyone uses those sidewalks regardless of the owners outside. I just was curious how that applied for,
Great question.
Yeah, and
certain
sometimes we do
areas.
projects,
Okay.
right? I
Yeah,
mean,
okay.
and.
Good to
so-
know.
And we also have to make sure things are to code, right? So when they're not, then there's times when we do have to step in. And that's why we have projects.
yeah, I probably tripped on that spot exactly.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Thanks, thank you.
Counselor Anderson.
Can I clarify? So I've heard from a lot of our businesses downtown that it's the type of tree that we planted, the red maple, that's causing so many buckles in the sidewalk.
Oh, yeah, we won't be replanting that.
Okay. And because I hear this so often, like what would the timeline be for expanding this project to other spots possibly? Or like what is the
So we
test
have
period
some
that we're looking at?
URA funds that I will be doing along Main Street. And it's to actually look at those trees. So the money is to dedicated for the trees and beautification of Main Street. So that's my next project I'm developing right
Right.
now.
Super helpful. Thank
Just
you.
the other thing to add too, I mean, certainly the tree, that red maple, the way that it grows, if it's not able to get moisture, it's
Sure.
going to try to seek, the roots are going to try to stay.
Because I got 3 truckloads of wood for my fireplace. I happened to be downtown on a Saturday when they were doing that, and they said, oh, sure, we'll cut off all the branches for you. But so was that, we didn't replace those trees with the red maples, did we?
I don't know what year you're talking
That was well before.
I think
my
what
time.
I think what it was related to was actually putting in the new bus mall.
Yeah, that would have been
Done
before.
Oh,
both
both
of
John
us.
and I were here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Since then, we do have a new tree list and a new street tree list. So we'll be using those options for downtown and even in the city. Like there is multiple things that, trees that can go underneath power lines and things like that. So smaller trees instead of bigger trees, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Monroe Greenway, here we go. So we had an open house in September 12th. Over 100 people came, which is quite exciting. Right now for our east leg that goes from Linwood to 37th, we're underway with ODOT, who's running the project. We've actually asked for some additional funds as they had some leftover funds. So we're trying to seek another 1.7 million, I believe, to aid that project. With inflation and things like that, I'm hoping to not have to cut some of the scope we originally talked about like 5 years ago. So we're excited. It is moving along. Yes, we've got some people that wish it would never come, but then we've got a lot of people that are quite excited about it. The next big thing is our water line that goes under 224. It's over 75 years old. And we decided we should replace that before they repave and do the signal at Monroe. It is under construction right now. It'll be done before the end of the year. And ODOT plans to go out to bid in January 2025 for their project.
The 37th to Linwood, do you have a timeline for actual going out to bid on that and stuff?
It is like January 2026. That may get pushed if we get the additional funds because we'll have to do an amendment to the
IGA.
the IGA and like everything for ODOT. So, yeah. So it's January of 2026.
Okay.
Can't say that.
And a more detailed Monroe Greenway updates slated for the December 3rd council meeting. So.
Then maybe some questions for the 3rd, but I'd love to think about a timeline for taking the project from the 224 down to McLaughlin, or just understanding what that timeline might be.
That needs funds.
Okay.
So it's unfunded at the moment.
Well, that's a long timeline. And then I guess the other thing that I think about is connecting from 29th down to Monroe. I know that there are some city plans and
To 42nd and then up. And then some work additional on 42nd all the way to Johnson Creek. Most of that is paving, but you see there, we do have a new water line that needs to come in. We have a little bit of sewer work that's happening on this project. We have a little bit of drainage work that's also happening. And then sidewalks going to be from 32nd all the way to 42nd and then up to Howell, where we finished our project for the 42nd Avenue and 43rd project. So we will finally have that all tied in with sidewalk. You'll see some green markings for the greenway on Harvey. You'll see some signage for that greenway. And then you'll see some sharrows for the bike way. And you'll see some traffic calming measures as well. Some bulb outs and things like that to narrow the street in certain places that make sense. We are just about at 100%, contractors providing them. And as soon as we have those, we will prepare it to go to bid. So I would assume in probably January, February, we're going out to bid. We do plan to go out best value, which is a construction alternative bid process.
And what does it consist of?
It consists of the contractors providing a proposal. The proposal accounts for 35% of the points, and then 65% of the points go to low bid. So they still provide a schedule, but then us engineers get to evaluate the contractor and their ability to do the work. So we get to put some qualifications to back our decision in that. It's still calculated, and the lowest person that has the highest points is awarded the project. Yeah. We use the same process for Washington area improvements. So construction, we anticipate to start in 2025 fiscal year. Waverly Heights Sewer Reconfiguration Project. Here our project goals are to repair our collection system. This is in the back of a lot of nice homes in Waverly Court. I think it was originally privately built out, and then some point we took over. So we have some easements, but we don't have all easements for this area. So right now we're working on a 90% design submittal and then cleaning up those easements. As soon as I have those easements, then we will be going out for procurement, put it out to bid, and bring the contractor on. I would say we're on budget at this moment. I'm hoping to have a contractor on by June, this next June.
When we need to get easements, is that something that engineering and Justin work on, or do we hire somebody to deal with easements?
We're hiring someone for this one. It's just a little bit complicated and cumbersome. It depends. Some we will do in-house, but we still have a right-of-way person give us a description and things like that. So it just kind of depends on what kind of easements we need. But for this project, the consultants has a sub that's doing the work. And it's a handful. It's not a ton. We had a majority of them. Some just need to be cleaned up. So that's the exciting part. And they want this fixed, so I do feel like someone's not sitting there trying to hold up the project. They know how important this is. All right, Waverly South and 26th Avenue improvements. Now that we are fully staffed, this is actually starting to move. So I've got an engineer on staff that has the survey, and they are starting to do their CAD work. Waverly South, we're repaving Lava and Waverly Court, sorry. We're upgrading the ADA ramps. We're pipe bursting the sewer line, and we're upsizing a 2-inch water line. We shouldn't have any 2-inch water lines within our system, so that'll be brought up to code, which is nice. 26th Avenue is getting a new sidewalk on one side, and then we're repaving from Lake Road to the end of the roadway. Meek, North Bays. We are so close. We are getting there. I don't know if you know what this project starts. Most likely at the moment, it sounds like King Road might have to get delayed unless we find additional resources. Or I save a lot of money on all the other projects as I put them out. We'll see. But that's my biggest kind of concern right now is that's the max we're looking at as far as a change order. But I don't want to keep coming back to council. So I'm asking for the full authorization, and then I'm hoping to get it under and save as much as I can. We're anticipated to be done by April next year, which will tell us kind of where we're sitting as far as that goes. We are a little bit ahead of schedule right now, installing the pipeline that's going in, but anything in the right away of the railroad is going slow, very slow. And you gotta build it to the T as far as whatever is on that drawing and on that plan. And if you're not, then you have to get an amendment to change it, which delays the project. So we're trying as best as we can and meet 95% compaction, which is not easy.
What was the original estimate for the project?
6 million? No, just north with the purchase of the property though. That's with construction's for purchasing and easements, and we have a water line bore, brought it to 6 million. Any other questions? Okay. Stanley Improvements. This is one of our newer projects. The county, it is in our CIP. The county approached us and asked if we wanted to go in on a project for Stanley Road. The project's between Johnson Creek and King Road. They're paying for about 65% of the project. We were hoping the other portion would be granted to us by Safe Routes to School. I have not heard from them. I'm not thinking we're getting those funds. So it is a 2 million deficit that we're gonna have to figure out how we wanna pay for. So I'll be coming back to council on that one. Again, this might be an opportunity where we're pulling from King Road if we already are pulling from King Road. Maybe King Road actually we do it in 2 phases. Maybe we do the first 1 phase of King Road and use the other half of the funds to help out these other projects that need to get through. So I'll be thinking strategically on how we do that. Also looking at all the projects where we're pulling dollars from and things like that. But we did get this money from the county, so we are obligated to move forward with it.
So on this one, there will be a side path. Does that mean a sidewalk?
A side path is it's for bikes and pedestrians, so 8-foot side path, full length from Johnson Creek.
And which side is it going to be on?
That'll be in decided. I'm not going to tell you which side right now.
Okay.
There's just too many things right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty narrow in places there.
That's why it's only going on one side. But it's also an opportunity to pull, bikes will still be able to be in the roadway. But if they want to be on this side path, it'll be another opportunity. Hopefully we can still do the RFB at Logus and Stanley.
Do what at Logus?
An RFB.
Safe Routes to School next grant period. It likely will have, if I'm reading tea leaves, one of the things that the legislature talks about a lot as they talk about transportation funding is the Safe Routes to School program and expanding it to meet the just demand that the program has.
Yeah.
But that likely would happen after the sunset of when we need the funds, or I guess.
So we have design funds, because I put design money in there to make sure we weren't held up on the project. I would say we are about 18 months away from needing, 18 to 2 years, needing construction dollars.
Okay.
So we do have some time, which
Yeah.
is a nice opportunity to say, where can we pull that? And maybe we don't have to actually pull it completely from King Road, right? So we do have a little bit of time there. But I do have design money, so that's exciting.
Okay. But there's a possibility for going out for another Safe Routes to School.
I mean, I think it's in 2 years, right? They do one every 2 years, so
Yeah.
it'll be cutting it close, but yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think we would apply for it before we would hopefully need the dollars, and then it's just a matter if we got them.
Yep. Helpful. Thank you.
So, yeah, I would definitely go out for it again. Okay. And here's our King Road improvements. All right, we just received 90%, so this one is behind Harvey. So I do expect to get Harvey out, see what kind of bids we can get. And then here's King Road. Right now, we're reviewing that 90% design submittal. It's a little over budget than what I would like, so we're evaluating if there's any cost value engineering we can do to bring that cost down a little bit. My consultants seem to be a little more conservative with their numbers, and we tend to get a little bit better, which is in a better position to be in. This project does go from Linwood right now all the way to 43rd. So we're stopping just shy of that intersection. It is 2 side paths on both sides of the road. We're bringing the curbs in and bringing those bikes up onto those paths. We have some failing stormwater facilities. All the dry wells are almost completely failing along King Road. There is no other system. It all goes to these dry wells. So that's where there's $2 million that was set into this project that we discovered before I did the budget cycle. And I gotta evaluate to see if we need the whole 2 million or can I put some of that to Meek. So still working on numbers and things like that, seeing where things sit. But we do have a storm issue. And so we cannot address, we have to address it. But we can build it in pieces. So we can split this project into phases because we're doing storm along the roadway, along the path. Any other questions on King?
We have catch basins that are failing, and you're saying we don't have any line that's going from carrying water from any.
We have dry wells that are failing.
dry wells,
So our
okay.
catch basins collect the rainwater through a pipe, and then they go to these wells, and these wells, we try to infiltrate them into the ground. And for King Road, for the new project, we're looking at doing longer galleries and not super deep galleries. These longer will allow them more time to be able to infiltrate into the ground. And so we're placing these throughout the project. So we only have to get pipelines to them if we need to upsize any of that.
And is that under the pavement, or is that under, in a swale, or what? I
It's
guess.
a combination of things depending on where we're at. We're looking at low spots in the system, so it may be on a side road under the pavement. It may be in our path, under our path, where we'll collect it. So we've kind of really gotten creative on the needs of the project, where to put it.
Interesting, thank you.
Yeah. All right, now we're getting to our water projects. I don't know, here's a awesome, yes, it's empty, it's got a hole cut. Yes, this is our picture. This is our reservoir. This is what it looks like right now.
Don't you think we should throw a giant party in there? I think it'd be awesome.
Yeah, I would say the exciting part is this is moving forward. They definitely have a tight time frame. There's a lot of work to be done on this and the inside of this reservoir, and we want it back up and running by March. So the water crew is super nervous because this is half of our storage not being able to be utilized, right? So we only have 3 million gallons right now that's in operation. This is a 3 million gallon tank, so that's half is basically. So we need to get this back up and running. Right now, they have just looked at what the roof and the structure. I haven't actually been out there yet.
Yeah, so I can add a couple things to this. So right now, they're in there actually doing some spot welding, replacing some of the rafters that are up in the ceiling. One of the things that we've run into, there's some caulking that was used because it was hard periods. We're fine for fire protection. We're fine meeting our current demand. The problem would be if we had a big fire during in the middle of the summer, during a peak demand period, then we'd probably run into some problems. So with this tank down, it does reduce some of our resiliency and flexibility that we have in the system right now.
So we're using ARPA dollars on this project, and we're using some whatever I've left over from Ardenwald North also on this project. So we are looking at upgrading the generator.
We're looking at a couple different options. The generator and transfer switch was one of the things we're looking at. There's some work at the well house on how the piping is configured. That will allow us, we're looking at doing some reconfiguration in there that will allow us some future flexibility. So we don't have to pick up the wellhead and rotate the pump to pump the water into the distribution system. We'll have a wellhead that's got like a double outlet on it that could pump in either direction depending on how we valve it off. So that's one of the things that we're looking at as well. As well as some minor work on the roof hatch. We're going to make some improvements, some additional improvements on the roof hatch and the ladder that goes into the tank as well. So.
David, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I fully understand the kind of the risk aspect there. You mentioned that, so it's offline from October to March, makes sense. But then you mentioned if there's a fire in peak summertime, but isn't that while it would be operational?
Right, and that's, that it would be, that would be when it's back in operation. And it's one of the reasons why we're.
Why? Oh, okay.
We're
I
doing
got
that
you
work
now. Okay. And then just so I make sure, like, vibes wise, we're good. There's impact wise, the reservoirs is the main area of impact is fire, like winter storm, if everything's frozen, is not generally would not impact the reservoir. Is that correct?
I guess
assume that-
I don't understand quite.
Like, I'm just like Austin, Texas, and like those areas when they had that huge freeze a while back. I know they had water issues, and I was just curious if there is like a crazy winter storm. Does that have any impact on the reservoir? Or no, it's more water, so I assume not. But I don't know.
Like I said, it does reduce our flexibility and resiliency. So there could be a scenario that zone 3, as opposed to having to only pump it to into the reservoir.
Yeah, right now you have to pump into the reservoir and then you pump out of
Oh, I
the
see.
reservoir into the distribution
Yeah.
system.
Okay,
So it'll change that.
Yeah.
It'll give us more opportunity and flexibility.
And right now, as Jen mentioned earlier, we're feeding our zone 3, where this reservoir is, from zone 2. So wells 2, 3, 5, and 4 and 7. Those are all being used from and being pumped out into the system. Generally, the zone 3 is water's fed from well 6 and from the reservoir here. And then we'll transfer water from time to time from zone 3 into zone 2 in the summer.
You mentioned the hatch on the top. Just curious, how often does one have to use the hatch on the top?
If we're doing an inspection, so if we'll get a diver to come in and do an inspection, or and they'll.
Oh, yeah.
That's the way they enter the tank.
Well, it's cheaper than draining the entire reservoir. You know what I mean? Like yeah. We will also have a new mixing system with this upgrade. And so you want to have that hatch to be able to see if there's anything I missed with that. Visual inspections. Okay. I just wanted to do this last slide, a quick update on our water engineering services. So we brought on 2 consultants and we are now digging into our well 8, which has been offline since 2012. That is a priority to figure out what we're going to do with that. The next one is our water treatment plant upgrades. We're starting to figure out what are our priorities for that. And then the consultant's going to be looking at a condition assessment and evaluating different treatment options. What do we need? What are our goals? We know we have some PFAS hits that we've got to address. If that becomes the priority, at the moment, what we know is we have to be in compliance by 2029. That is not very far out. So we've got a lot of work to keep moving forward with that. Then our concrete tank has some upgrades that need to happen. It is an older tank, but it's right now tasked to have a new liner and it needs some seismic upgrades, which is our 1.5 million gallons. It's 100 years. I think it is 100 years old, 1929. So it's close. It's almost 100 years old. Concrete.
It's the
At 40th.
tank off of 40th and Harvey that has the mural on it.
And then a new reservoir. That'll be the third kind of major task kind of in that area. So it's kind of storage, treatment, and wells. Is what we've got that divided up to. So the main mechanism of that team though is to start looking at identifying funding and how are we gonna start figuring out how to pay for these new water upgrades that need to happen. So, question.
I guess this is not maybe in the scope of this work, but when you mentioned PFAS, it came to mind, which is the lead pipe connection issue for homes. I know we've had crews out doing some sampling, and I've been reading in the paper about West Lynn and other cities and what they're finding in their sampling. So just anything to say about that?
Sure. So we, over the last year, we went out and did a lead, a service line inspection to determine if we had any lead services in our system. So what we did first was we sent out a survey to all the residents that they could participate in. We got maybe, 2.5% to 5% participation in that. And then from there, we used that information and the information that we had in their GIS to determine a statistical sample that we would need to go out and inspect to determine if we had any lead services. So using all of that information, we identified that we needed to go out and actually physically inspect approximately 350 services throughout the city. And those were services less than 2 inches, or 2 inches or smaller. We completed that inspection in early October, and I'm pleased to say that we did not find any lead services. None. So based on that statistical analysis that we were able to do, that generally would mean that we don't have any. Lead services are generally much more prevalent in the Midwest and East Coast. They typically weren't installed out here in the Pacific, on the Pacific and the West Coast. That doesn't mean that we don't have any, but what we've seen from our sampling and surveys and work out in the field, that we did not find any. But we're certainly on the look for it, yeah. We do have a link on our website, and I think we're looking to get some additional information out. We're working with the consultant, 120 Water, to help us message that information out there further.
I happened to research like home lead test kits this past week because my son had gotten one for free for the part of Portland area region that he lives in. And so I was like, oh, maybe I should get that and check out my house and stuff. And so I was researching, and some of the cities around us will offer free kits. And I was like, well, how come Milwaukee's not doing that? But then I found where it had online, the Milwaukee's tested and hasn't found any lead in their water. So there is information online about it.
Yeah, and I will say, we just looked at the service line, so from the main to the house. So that doesn't mean that there isn't any lead inside houses, in some of the interior plumbing. Lead solder was a commonly used in copper plumbing. So it is possible, but from what we found based on our analysis, we didn't find any.
And on top of that, I recall there are tanks that, some of the tanks have lead in them or some.
Yeah, I mean, it was very common
Yeah.
for like base coats on both on the exterior and interiors of water reservoirs
Yeah.
that they used lead.
Yeah.
And in some cases, other contaminants that are no longer used in painting systems because of the problems that they have. So on the reservoir, one of the things that we're doing is we're fully removing the coatings on both the interior and exterior. And there is lead on the exterior
Yeah.
that's being removed.
Okay. So there, yeah. And so I just wanted to make sure to like semi be a narc, because that there is lead in places. We're just talking about the service lines.
We're
right
just
now.
talking
Okay,
about the
cool.
service
Thanks.
lines. Yes, the
Thanks for
service
clarifying.
lines.
Yeah, let's get the lead out. Sounds good.
Any other questions?
I just want to quickly say thank you to Jen. Every time I secure one of these CIP presentations, I'm just in awe. You know, there's no shade on my former colleagues up in Portland, but it's like so amazing to me. Our engineers here, they do it all. You know, it's not just they do traffic design or they do one thing. And it's so great to see our engineering team fully staffed and, as you can see, like ready and raring to go with so much of the CIP work. The reason we put this presentation on the budget committee meeting is actually because there's just so many Gen presentations coming up on council agendas, talking about greenways, talking about Monroe, talking about Safe and SSMP. So we thought this was the good time to get the full overview, and then you're going to drill deeper into some specific projects and specific funds in the coming months. So nice job, Jen.
Okay, so our next order of business is Public Works Director Peter Passarelli will give us an update from the CUAB meeting on the comprehensive study and the Kellogg.
Did they reorder?
Yes, they reordered, yep. Yep. This is my agenda.
Well, thank you, Chair Schachner. I'm Peter Passarelli. I'm the Public Works Director, and I just have really two slides this evening. I wanted to just have a quick discussion with the full Budget Committee on what we discussed at our CUAB meeting earlier this month on November 4th. And in that meeting, I presented some information on two different pieces. One on our comprehensive rate study for our water and wastewater, and also talked to the group about the Good Neighbor program that we're in the process of putting a grant program out together. So I plagiarized from FCS, John Ghilarducci from FCS. We're engaged with them to do our water and wastewater study. And John, I thought he had a really good slide here that sort of walked through the process of what we're going to do for this rate study. So five different steps here that we're looking at. And, you know, we're really sort of initially in sort of the information gathering stage. So we're going to be providing FCS a lot of our consumption data as it relates to water and wastewater, the customer data, so they can use that to start taking a look at that analysis. But as we go through this process, we're going to be looking at several things. First and foremost is our financial policies, in particular for the water and wastewater. And that's how we, you know, really sort of set what our reserve levels are for those two utilities. So we'll have discussions with CUAB and council on what's appropriate as John looks at that analysis and looks at what we have in particular. I think I know several of the council members, and I think some of the budget committee members have in the past made comments about are we setting those at the appropriate amount? So we're going to go through this analysis and determine, are we adequately, you know, protecting ourselves against financial risks? The next part would be John will be working on, and FCS will be working on, is that revenue requirement. And that ties into making sure that we're generating the appropriate amounts of revenues for our operations and maintenance cost, any debt that we might have, and future capital improvements. Some of those that Jen talked about that we're working with a consultant on right now, some of the treatment plant upgrades and things like that. And then from there, we're going to be doing this cost of service study. And that's where we'll take a look at, are we charging our different customer classes the appropriate amount of, are we getting the appropriate amounts of revenue from those different customer classes? And are we doing that in an equitable manner? And then once we've gone through that, there'll be an opportunity to develop what the specific rates look like. And then that's where, you know, we start to look at, do those rates align with our objectives when we look at our low-income customers, our low-use customers? Do we have a desire to set up a conservation-based rate? So we'll look at those and develop those pieces. And then from there, we'll go out, once we've gone through that, we'll have a plan on how we're going to communicate any changes that we do with our customers. So I think John covered that in probably about 20 slides, but I thought this was a pretty good summary slide that he had there.
And is the goal to have? Is the goal to have rates for the next budget cycle?
It is. It would be that, I guess it would be July 1, 2026. Yeah. So that would be that would be the goal, that we'd have a new rate recommendations that would be coming to council during, at the budget, council and the budget committee during the next budget cycle. Any other questions? All right. And then the other thing that we spent some time talking about was our Good Neighbor program. And what I outlined to the CUAB was the framework of a program where the CUAB played a role in reviewing and recommending which projects would move forward. And there were certain components to those applications and projects that we would take a look at. And first and foremost was the project an eligible project? Was it within the boundaries that we worked on and agreed to with Wes? And then we had outlined some different project scoring criteria that were based on the program's goals. And those goals were generally, does it improve recreational opportunities such as pathways and parks and trails? Does it enhance fish and wildlife habitat and riparian areas? And does it enhance the public knowledge or on wastewater treatment and surface water quality? Those were program goals that Wes defined as part of their Good Neighbor program. And then in addition to that, we identified three different criteria as related to equity, climate resilience, and regulatory compliance pieces. So using the project eligibility and the goals, we identified a total of 35 points that projects could score. And we would go through a scoring matrix with each applicant. We were looking at having an application cycle that ran from March through June. And those projects could be internal from staff or external from eligible applicants such as nonprofit organizations, perhaps, a watershed council or an NDA. And as I said, the city could be an internal applicant. We were looking at internal projects from the city, would be dependent upon what funding might be available. And external projects could qualify for up to $50,000. There would be a grant agreement that would be part of that program and reporting requirements that would be quarterly and annually.
Peter, I'm looking at the application cycle, and my recollection is we talked about doing the first one in March through June, but then moving
That
it
is correct.
back in, so that we're not trying to do that at the same time we're doing the
$1,000 a year. Through 2029, we have some debt that we're paying back, which is roughly 80 to 90,000 within that range that we're paying back. And after 2029, that debt is paid off, so that opens up that full amount to then be used. Currently, I think we had as a balance of about 350-ish thousand. I don't have the other slide with me. What I had suggested to the CUAB that we remove the next debt service payment, so it would be roughly about 250,000 available in this upcoming cycle for use. After that, and after we've accounted for any of those debt services, those dollars would be available. The full amount of what we have would be available as needed. We do have some requirements from Wes that we have to either spend the money by a certain date or report back to them if we need to push it back. They do want to claw some of that money back if we're not spending it. So we definitely want to, use as much of it as we can and demonstrate to them that we're making a good effort in expending that money on the programs. Does that answer your question? Yeah. And I think that was all I had.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay.
So is that, there's like an application and you're going to start posting it? Because March isn't that far away.
We're working on that. So
Oh, okay.
And it's going to be very similar to what Joseph's done with the URA sort of application format.
Yeah, okay.
I just want to make a side comment also that the CUAB did finally manage to adopt new bylaws, which are going to be coming to the council for approval. And we changed our name to the Community Utility Advisory Committee because we are a subcommittee of this committee. So we are now the Quackers.
Okay.
And if we're going to mention the bylaws, we should really appreciate all of Leslie's really diligent, detail-oriented work on those because she really led the charge on that.
Well, thanks. I am done.
Report to us, city manager and then present the financial stability report. It's in section.
Yes, absolutely. And as a big Duck fan, I'm very pleased to hear about the quack. Well, good evening, and thanks so much for the patience with our schedule shuffling. I want to make sure there's a lot of night meetings this week, the week before Thanksgiving, so if I can let some of my hardworking staff go home a little early, I would love to do that. But Michael and I are both really excited to give you first a quick little just city update. I try to kind of catch the highlights from the last quarter, but then we'll spend the bulk of this update talking about this beautiful, colorful table you have in front of you. So looking back at quarter two, it was another busy and productive quarter in Milwaukie. You've heard a lot already about some hiring that we've done. We have a fully staffed engineering team, which I thought would never happen in my time in Milwaukie. It's actually kind of hilarious when you walk to that corner of the second floor now and you see all the bodies there. You're like, oh, whoa. Where did you all come from? Because it's been quiet for so long, but that's just great news for our CIP. We've continued to do a lot of hiring out at Public Works as well. There've been some great promotions, but also some great external hires there. And then I have a very hot off the presses announcement for today. We completed our assistant city manager recruitment process last week, and I'm happy to announce that Joseph Brelio will be removing the acting part of his title, and he will become our assistant city manager. So we had over 85 people apply for that job. It was a really competitive pool, but we have great talent here in the city, and Joseph's done a great job for the past 6 months, and I know we'll continue. Other exciting things, we have a tentative agreement with our largest labor union, AFSCME. Council will be considering voting to ratify that tomorrow night, and Michael will talk a little bit more about the financial implication of that agreement, but we're really excited to be reaching that milestone. Tons of CIP progress. You just heard a lot about that from Jen. Our audit is underway. Michael will talk a little bit more about that as well. The business improvement grants that are funded by our urban renewal area, we're up to 10 of those now that have either gone out the door or are about to go out the door, which is just fantastic. Those are 10 businesses in the urban renewal area that are directly going to be benefiting from these funds. We're gearing up for, it's so funny, you'd think that the sunny time would be when we do the most events. Oh no, we are hardy Northwestern folk in Milwaukie. So we're gearing up for our busy event season. Umbrella Parade on December 7th, Solstice on December 21st, and Bing in the New Year on December 31st. I also just want to give a shout out to my staff. One of our priorities in our strategic plan is to support the revitalization of Milwaukie. And I heard from a lot lot of my departments who maybe aren't directly involved in sort of that community development work. Hey, we want to play a role in this. We want to show our community some love and be a part of the sprucing it up. So on December 2nd, if you find yourself downtown, you'll see an army of city staff from HR to finance to library to police out there doing some downtown cleanup work, kind of getting downtown looking and feeling as spiffy as it can before our busy event season. So I really appreciate that. And then if you are a longtime Milwaukeean who has heard of something called Milwaukie Days that hasn't been around for a while. Yes. Well, Milwaukie Days, may it rest in peace. It's going to keep its name as a beautiful, moment of the past, but we are resurrecting a summer event that we are calling Milwaukie Fest.
It is Milwaukie Days, D-A-Z-E.
Yes, indeed. But Milwaukie Fest is a new celebration coming in 2025. So that'll be like Milwaukie Days, a sort of a weekend of celebration in the city. We're really excited about that, and I could tell you more after the meeting if you'd like to know. The big thing that we're here to talk about tonight is the continued progress we are making on that financial stability strategy that we launched at our last budget committee meeting. So to kind of reground us as to why we need to have a stability strategy in the first place, I really want to bring this graphic back. This was a graphic we showed you during the budget process. At the last place I worked, which had a similar graphic, they called it lovingly the jaws of death. I think that's a little harsh, but what this graph shows is two trends. One in blue is the trend of city general fund revenues over the last several years. And you can see, it bumps and oscillates, but it's generally a horizontal line. If you drew a trend line through there, it'd be pretty flat. The pink line is our expenditure line. Different story. That's a ever increasing upward trend. And the reason for these two different trends is first, we have limits on our revenues. Our primary source of general fund revenue being property tax, that is limited to a 3% growth rate by measures 5 and 50. And there are other factors that limit our growth. Things like the URA, which does put some property tax revenue into a restricted bucket. And then the reason for the pink line going up is all sorts of things. Inflation, we feel it too. Outdated infrastructure and systems that are in need of a replacement. That's just, general wear and tear of cities, but also just the need to modernize and all the great work we need to do to keep meeting the needs of our city. Our city is growing. The problems are in some ways becoming more complex. So there's greater demands on city services. A good example of that might be the behavioral health needs that our public safety team might not have really thought of as part of their core portfolio even a decade ago. And then finally, the cost of living does continue to climb, and we want to be an employer of choice. So when Michael talks about the labor agreement we just negotiated, it reflects that much higher cost of living, and we are not the only city experiencing that kind of change. So why is that graph concerning? Well, we don't have our forecast chart up here, but I'll remind you that if you look at our general fund forecast, it looks okay in year 1, okay in year 2, it starts to go in the red in year 3 and out. And if we can't get a handle on that, if we can't fix that trajectory, in the next biennium, we're gonna have to start cutting costs in general fund. When we talk about what general funded programs there are, that's public safety, that's public works, and you might be saying, well, isn't public works funded by utilities? Much of it is, but not all of it. All of our public works administration, the natural resources work, all of that is general funded. All of our facilities and fleet maintenance work is general funded. Community development, the work of planning, much of the work of engineering is an economic development is general fund. Library, and then our customer services and the things that make us a efficient and effective government, HR, finance, administration, those kinds of things. And it's not just that I love those departments that we care about this. The graph on the right is direct data from our last community survey at the end of 2023, when Milwaukeeans were, a statistically valid sample of Milwaukeeans were asked what services that the city provides are most important to you. This is the top list. And there's high marks for even a lot of things beyond this, but the first two on there, okay, those are generally ratepayer services. We have utility bills and street fees that cover those top two. But public safety, attracting and retaining business, creating safe places for people to walk and bike, and police services. Those are all those general funded things that people really care about. And if we have to start reducing services, that really keeps me up at night. So this is the Venn diagram of that stability strategy that we unveiled a few months back. It has three pieces. We want to stabilize our costs, which means getting a handle on that pink line that's going up, curbing that and tightening our belt however we can. We want to maximize our existing revenue systems. So, you heard Peter talk about the rate study he's doing, but all across the city, we have to make sure we are capturing costs wherever we can. But that's not going to be enough. We do need to identify new revenues. And so that's where this beautiful red, yellow, green spreadsheet comes in. I'm going to give a quick progress report on all three of these, but we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about the revenue ideas. So for stabilizing costs, you all helped us develop a budget for this biennium that wherever possible held the line on materials and services. Even though inflation makes things cost more, I told departments they had to keep their budget from the last biennium, which really felt like a cut in many ways. Our wonderful IT manager has been doing yeoman's work looking through all of the various IT subscriptions in the city and finding where are there redundancies, where are there things where we can cut that or end that subscription so we can really find every nickel and dime. And we're also doing, we're trying to be really strategic anytime an organizational need comes up to think, how can we solve this without taking on unnecessary expenditure. And just a quick kind of shout out to Michael. Michael lost our longtime utility billing clerk kind of unexpectedly earlier this year. And what might have been the easy option, and I think where some people really wanted to go was, let's hire a temp. We got to get someone in there, get those bills out. Oh my gosh, if we lose time, we're going to be doomed. But Michael and our former HR director rolled up their sleeves and said, what would be better for the organization and save us money would be to see if there's an existing staff person in the city who would like to be cross-trained on those skills and be in that role temporarily. We had two individuals, one primarily, but two individuals from the library who took us up on that. So now when we are rehiring that utility billing clerk, but if that person ever goes out on leave or needs to take a vacation or anything like that, we have staff that have built skills and know this critical function in the city. And we saved a lot of money not using an outside temp agency. What's coming up? We are really looking at schedules across our departments, but particularly in our more than 9 to 5 or more than 8 to 5 departments. So library, public works, police, to think about how we can be most efficient and get a handle on overtime usage, particularly in public safety. And Michael will talk a little bit more about that. We are launching an organizational assessment this winter. I've talked a little bit about this in some other contexts, but I think there's some good hard looking we need to do at our structure that hasn't been kind of dusted off in a while to see if it's still serving us or if there are any opportunities for that creative efficiencies to find and save us some money. And we're optimizing city buildings to reduce energy costs. And I kind of chuckle at this one because it was so cold in here this morning. One of our heaters wasn't on. So I guess we saved some money, but we shivered a lot. But we are looking to just practice what we preach in terms of energy efficiency. On the maximizing existing revenue streams, one thing we've talked to you about and we're going to continue to do is see wherever we can offset general fund expenditures with other funds. Urban renewal dollars, you approved that we can use some of those for our community development director, for example, when he's working on URA things. And we're just going to continue to kind of take that sharpened pencil approach to our budget. And then a lot coming up to just make sure we are maximizing these revenue streams. We will talk a little bit when we get to revenue ideas about credit card fees, but that's, I think, a place where we sieve a lot of money when people use credit cards to pay for things in the city. We need to comb through our like 54-page fee schedule, A, to make it more readable, but B, to make sure all of those fees capture the full costs of work. There's some infrastructure upgrades we could do that could modernize utility billing. That would be a cost outlay to start, but cities have shown that when you do that, you often then recoup costs higher. We'll talk a little bit about parking and business registration fees, where we could do some redesign to, I think, get more out of those revenue streams. Changing enforcement practices to better capture violations. I think this one, is just, again, asking our teams to just look at their practices and see, are we aligning with our goals, not being overly punitive, but fully capturing the costs of things that we do have a need to capture. And we have not had someone in the finance team looking at our right-of-way and franchise fees for a while. That is something we could consider assigning again to a staff person, because there is some revenue I think we might be leaving on the table in terms of going after some of those fees and licenses. And finally, our cost allocation methodology. So this is how things are transferred from the other funds to general fund. We should dust that off before the next budget too, to make sure that that is accurately and adequately capturing the general fund. Okay. But the one you really want to talk about, I'm sure, is the new revenue ideas. So what did we do over the last quarter? We confirmed the universe of options, which when I say that, that's all the ideas in this big spreadsheet. We also confirmed all the things you see in the columns, the different criteria that we felt it was important to screen these ideas against. And I just want to give so much credit to Michael. This is a big lift. There's consulting firms that would charge you a lot of money to do this work. And Michael's really been leading it as a one-man show. So he conducted a multi-criteria analysis of all these ideas and helped us kind of zoom in on what our target is. So what we're trying to do, the kind of bullseye we're trying to hit, is to find around $3 to $5 million of new general fund revenue over the next in the next biennium. So keep that in mind as sort of the target we're trying to reach. I also know I'm talking a lot about general fund. My last slide tonight is going to be looking at some other funds, but the general fund is really the one where that stability is most critical right now.
So 3 to 5 per year, or 3 to 5 for biennial?
3 to 5 for a biennial budget. So what we want to do, what we're hoping to do at this milestone, is get your thoughts on the list that we want to take away from this big table to do further analysis on. You obviously can't read this. So I'm flashing it up here just for our folks at home to know that they can go into the packet and see this and zoom in more detail. And all of our budget committee members, you have it printed out in front of you. I'm going to come back to it, so don't worry. But the punchline, and this was sort of in the staff report in your packet, these are the 7 ideas that we feel from the staff analysis make the most sense to carry forward for further look. Not saying we would implement all of these necessarily, but this is sort of where our analysis landed. The first 4 on there, the reason there's a little space, I think these are kind of in the cleanup category. These are things where we've got the mechanism that exists. We just would need to kind of retool it. So updating parking permit rates, not a big revenue generator, but a kind of a no-brainer. We lowered the permit rates for just to kind of try this out with one customer, and it's reliable credit. They bought so many more permits that we're already making more revenue on it. So I actually think we just are out of scale with our supply and demand, and putting that actually down a little bit would increase demand for parking permits. We currently do not charge right-of-way license fees on non-city utilities that use our right-of-way. This is like Clackamas River Water, Oak Lodge Water District. So that's something we could explore doing and achieve and raise a little bit more revenue. The credit card transaction fees I talked about, I think that's one where we lose a significant amount of money every year. And then updating our business license tax structure so it's a little more in alignment with the city's goals and could generate more revenue. Then the ones that you see in the bottom there, these are really, I mean, yes, we already do property taxes, but I would say these are more in the bigger news streams ideas. When you look at that target we're trying to hit, that 3 to 5 million over the biennium, I don't see a path to do that without looking at a property tax move. So that could either be a 5-year levy, or it could be a permanent lid lift, both of which would require voter approval. Permanent lid lift means our current permanent tax rate is, I believe, 4.2, and it would be raising that up to somewhere up to, I think it's about 6.2. That is room that we have because of an agreement that occurred when the voters approved creating Clackamas Fire District and peeling that off. That lowered our rate and said, if you want to raise that back up to what your permanent rate was, Milwaukie, you need to get approval from the voters. And then the last two on here are ideas related to traffic safety, a photo red light program and a traffic speed camera program. These are both strategies that have been implemented by other cities, and we, in very preliminary estimates, think it could generate about what you see on the screen there. The next step for us would be really sharpening our pencils and doing a much deeper analysis on these ideas, but we're just kind of give you the ballpark here. I'll stop at this page and we can have some good discussion before I go on. Mary.
Two questions. One is just quickly trying to add these numbers. It doesn't seem like it's coming to 3 to 5 million. Maybe scraping 3, depending on what like a 5-year property tax levy would generate. And that seems like the biggest question mark up there. And then, so does this get far enough is the first question. And the second question is, Milwaukie used to have a very robust photo red light program and traffic speed cameras. Why was that dismantled and now bringing it back?
Sure.
It sounds like it's coming back more for revenue generation than for safety reasons.
Sure. Yeah, both great questions. Michael, I might have you take the are we close to hitting our target or not point, and then I can answer the traffic safety question.
I think to answer your question, so for the 5-year property tax, the 1 million on there is a very loose estimate. I'm currently working with the county on what that would be, the different steps of if we wanted to increase it or if we wanted to do a 5-year levy, what that would look like. They reached out and said there's a lot of compression in the city, meaning that a lot of the homes are below market value, but down their assessed value is lower. So it's something to take into account. I don't know exactly right now where that would be, but I think that there's enough room in the property tax that we would have to explore if that would fill the gap.
I also believe the numbers we're seeing here and the numbers that are in your table are annual numbers. And whereas the target I gave you was a biannual. So it's a little less bleak than you think, but it's still, that would help. That puts it into the ballpark. And then a really great question, Mary, on the traffic safety measures, and I had a good conversation with the mayor on that topic today too. I think this has been an interesting trend in cities and other cities I've worked in over the last decade, where it was kind of in favor, fell out of favor, and now is sort of coming back into favor, as I think we're seeing from a safety side, that we do still have significant traffic safety concerns. You know, I worked in Portland, it's a Vision Zero city, so it's trying to achieve 0 traffic fatalities, and instead their traffic fatality number keeps climbing and climbing. And what they have found is enforcement is the number one strategy for changing behavior and creating safer conditions. I do think, we're trying to be really transparent here. We are bringing this up as part of a revenue conversation, but I think why these ideas are appealing to us, and this is one of the criteria on the list, is the sort of co-benefits or alignment with city values and city goals. So our police department is not willing to say right now, yes, let's go do this, but is intrigued by exploring the idea because of the co-benefit it could have for, one, shoring up some stability for public safety funding, but two, creating safer conditions on some of our streets, particularly for folks who travel through Milwaukie, but maybe don't live in Milwaukie, and then maybe enabling our traffic safety patrol officers to patrol the neighborhoods. One difference with the previous model, I believe, and people who have been around me longer can tell me if I'm wrong, but that was a photo radar van that was staffed by a police officer. These would both be unmanned pieces. They'd be mounted on signals, traffic signals.
So we don't have the existing infrastructure
We don't,
for it?
no.
It would be different than what was
Yes,
before? Okay.
yep, but great questions.
I had a question. I will pass. It'll come back to me, but I don't have it now.
Ask a clarifying question. Compression, measure 5 and 50, I get generally, but compression has always been a hard thing to wrap my head around. Is compression an issue both with a levee and a permanent lid lift, or only a levee?
I'm not an expert, but I think it's only with the levee.
Levee, okay.
But I can confirm that.
You stole my question, Mayor. With the compression, you were saying there's a problem in the assessed value being lower than what it should be as well. Did I get that right, or?
The way I look at it is we have a lot of older homes that
Yeah.
were here pre-1990s. So their assessed value has grown by measures 5 and 50. We don't have as many new homes coming in, so that I'll talk about Cherokee Farms later, but like them, they're coming in, so they have they're coming in at the market value. So they're at a higher point, a higher tax rate than the older homes that have been here for a while. And I think that difference is called the compression. I don't know if I explained that right.
I think there are two types of compressions that we're talking about here too.
Okay.
There is that training material online.
Yes.
My question was, do we have enough red light, traffic lights that would generate that amount? Would most of them be on like 224 and McLaughlin?
That's something we'd have to, again, sharpen the pencils on in this
'cause
next round.
Other than them, we don't really have a lot of traffic lights.
Yeah, and there'd probably need to be some intergovernmental agreements brokered with the agencies that manage those facilities. So, yeah, these ballparks came from some analysis our police department did as a preliminary, but again, please take all of this with a bit of a grain of salt. We needed to start big and then narrow down and do deeper analysis.
They were trying to look at other cities our size and what their programs have produced and generated. So maybe they have more traffic lights than we do, and we haven't done that comparison, but this is just kind of ballpark.
I can just tell you anecdotally that I see a lot of red light running at McLaughlin and River Road. It's gotten better. I mean, it got really bad in the pandemic. I think just enforcement was down everywhere. And so red light running on McLaughlin got to be like a contest, I think. And it's better now than it was at the worst, but I still see it quite a bit.
Can I clarify here? Because you do split these into two buckets. Yeah. Would you require 4 new FTE for both of these programs, or is it 2 total?
That's a great question. And I think that's part of the thing we'd have to sharpen the pencil on. So I don't want to say exactly one way or the other. Mm-hmm. I think I would hope that we could do it with like an FTE added to our court and an FTE added to our police department. Mm-hmm. And we might have to monitor and see what demand does. But I think if we took either or, it would also be 1 and 1. But I'm hopeful that if we were to take both, it's a similar enough stream of work that with the 2 FTE, you can manage it.
And do these numbers take into account it's after FTE or no? So I think about the cost of 2 FTE versus the revenue that we earn. We're losing.
I believe that was net revenue
Okay,
generated.
Okay.
So after the costs of infrastructure and of additional administrative costs, we're
Okay.
looking at a net addition of 350, 400.
Okay. And one last clarifying question is the speed cameras are not necessarily at intersections. This would be randomly through the city we're throwing, or maybe not randomly, but throughout the city, we're policing speed to see if people are going over 25 miles an hour, maybe 20 miles an hour by then, but
I think that's correct. I'm not sure what the regulations are as to what kind of infrastructure you can place enforcement cameras on, but that's totally the type of thing we can come back as we take these ideas further.
Something else to keep in mind is that with the camera cost, there's implementation cost too. So it might take a year that we're going to have to pay for the infrastructure for the cameras and the necessity to get it before we ramp to this level.
if I may, Chair, I guess one thing that I'm interested in is how much these programs change behavior and what that does. I know you mark it as volatile, but after 10 years of these programs or 5 years of these programs, are we still expecting the same return on investment or?
It's an excellent question. It's something we can ask the police department about.
Okay. And I guess the other thing that I wonder is, and I hate to do this to you, Michael, as we think about a program that is so clearly tied to one of our values as our city with pedestrian and bicycle and just multimodal safety, I do wonder about tying some of these funds into direct improvements. If you set aside some funds for our STIP program or our SAFE program or some supplementing those programs, I think there's a clear, as I think about how we market this to residents, I do think it's important that they see a clear, we all on the dais can see a connection between these taxes and our larger goals, but I think
there's a good from the revenue.
Yep.
Yeah.
David?
Just a small comment just on just increasing policing in these kind of areas. I just want to point out that a lot of these like credit card transaction fees, increasing policing for traffic stuff. I just want to point out that has provenly disproportionately impacts people of lower economic impact status. So while I know there is a desire to get as much money as possible from people, just that I hope that council takes into account the disproportionate impact on lower income individuals.
I think on the spreadsheet, there is a line to that, how it affects, I think it's to equity.
Oh,
To be structured equitably in the middle of the page, David?
okay.
Yeah, I'm back to, which tags along with David's comment, is I think as the city embarks on any of these, it's just, the city needs to be crystal clear on what the goal is. Because like implementing a photo red light program or traffic speed cameras, if you're implementing it for safety, you're going to do like Beaverton sends people to online school, or it gives people that option for their first offense. That's much different. That's a safety oriented program versus revenue generation,
Yeah.
where you're going to fine people right out of the bat. And so, and the same with credit cards, is making sure, what any maybe unintended consequences might be for any of these programs. And so I think it's just, the city just needs to be real clear on the goals.
Yeah, definitely. And that was because the first thing we brought up with the stoplights was revenue, not safety. That was the third thing that we kind of brought up on this. So, yeah. And I also just want to add one more thing with this. And I'm just kind of getting ahead of myself to the Q1 analysis. I emailed Michael about this question. Is that I know we have a severe staffing shortage with the police, and we also have, I think since the last budget meeting, 3 additional police officers who are on paid administrative leave for a shooting and potential child porn. And so we are going to have additional overtime costs. So I was wondering, and again, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but is there contingencies in place, and is this part of a ballooning cost? Because I know last year our police general salaries budget went up by 30%. It wasn't really hold the line. It went up, 30%. Is that factored into this, and is this where the revenues are needed mainly for, or is it everywhere?
So in the next part, when I'm talking about the quarterlies,
Yeah.
I was going to address overtime specifically.
Okay.
It is something I watch. I'm using rough estimates here, but
Yeah.
I think we increased the budget from 590,000 to nearly 800,000 via supplemental in the previous year, and we carried that forward to this year. Police is understaffed, and
Definitely, yeah.
their overtime is trending higher than that. Right now, I think we can absorb it because we increased the budget for it, but it's something that I'm working with the chief and Emma to continuously watch to see. I don't know the answer to that yet, but because they're so understaffed, it could. And we just need to daylight it and be transparent.
Yeah. And again, I know this sounds very anti-cop. This is not anti-cop. This is like just one of the largest budget items, and probably the single biggest increase last year. And I just want to make sure that we're addressing, if we think, adding an extra police officer on this will increase something, but then we end up incurring all of this overtime because we have, 20% of our staff is on leave right now or something like that.
Something the payroll clerk tells me is if we hire just 1 or 2 more police officers, the amount it would reduce overtime costs because we'd be paying them regular pay instead of overtime, which makes 100% sense. But it's hard with police because it's hard to find police. They have to go through the training. They have to go through the year of the background. And I wish it was that easy, but it's not. And I know that Chief is working to really recruit and look for police. And they're always looking for lateral moves for that so that we can bring the overtime costs down. It's just hard.
And I just want to encourage folks, tomorrow night at council, Chief Burdick and I will be giving an update on sort of our state of the department, our vision and values, how we're operationalizing that and speaking to a lot of this. These are great questions, David. And I also just want to clarify that when he said we'd have to add FTE for these programs, it's not to be out there doing the patrol for this. It would be sort of on the administrative processing side. I completely appreciate your great questions about equitable design, and those are questions we absolutely will have to ask and ask to you as you decide whether or not we move forward with these. These 2 pieces here could I think be designed to try to remove bias as much as possible, being a sort of objective and data-driven component. That said, I take the point that, these types of fees and charges do have a disproportionate impact on people living on low incomes. And that'd be another thing I think the city would need to take a hard look at how we design, maybe even restitution elements of it, so that we practice what we preach on our values of equity and inclusion.
It strikes me that there's less of an opportunity for bias when it's a camera on a pole.
Yeah, I think, I echo the committee's concerns about, being transparent about what this is all about. I think the easiest ones to do here is just the cost recovery. I mean, the credit card thing to me, is like a no-brainer. You're just recovering your cost so that you're getting the amount that you're supposed to be getting. And so where does Peter's fee proposal fit in here? I was a little bit, I kind of understand it, but I was also a little bit disappointed that it was so far out. But does it fit in here?
It's a great question. And that's sort of the what about other funds? So I will say that we've really intentionally, this conversation could be the rest of our lives. So we've tried to really focus on the general fund for this conversation and this analysis, because that is, again, I think where the need is the most acute. But across our utility funds and other funds, there's similar principles could be asked. Are we maximizing the revenue? Are we stabilizing our costs? So to the parts that Peter was talking about, that's really transportation, water, and stormwater and wastewater.
Yeah, I understand it's not general. And one other question is, I was really intrigued by an idea that floated around that I didn't see on a spreadsheet, and that was a delivery vehicle tax. Is that on there?
I think it was, or it was at one point.
Towards the bottom.
Yes, implement fee on food package deliveries.
So that's food and packages.
Food, we looked at food and packages. This is one where I will say, I agree. I think the opportunity is exciting. I think that the impact that they have on our right of way and on other elements like safety is huge. The big risk there is the legal piece. And we've got, cities like Chicago and New York flirting with this and getting scared because of the legal risk. So that's why you see quite a bit of red in that
Yeah,
realm.
I view this as a cost recovery issue as well, because of the wear and tear on the streets. That there is not a day go by on my block where, I don't know, I should get out and count them one day. I mean, they're there all the time,
Okay. Are we done on this?
Oh,
We got.
Oh, okay. Oh, my God. Oh, go ahead. So who's first? I didn't see.
To Council President Massey's point, one other fee that I'm not seeing on here is a gas tax increase locally. I know Portland has one. Was there any thought about that?
So the reason you probably don't see it on here is because we really focus this on general fund. And my understanding is a gas tax increase would constitutionally have
That's
to go
true.
into your transportation fund.
Okay.
So I think that's part of looking at the SSMP safe and gas tax as part of our transportation fund health.
Now you're asking an interesting question. Is the food and packaging delivery fee, interesting question with Article 11 there. I wonder also, I know the state is really considering a delivery fee in its transportation plan. And are we thinking or tracking any developments in the state and how that might overlap? Like I could see if we pass a $1 delivery fee and the state passes a $1 delivery fee, the unintended consequences kind of double and add up as we think about all these actors talking about taxes.
I think it's a great point. Something I'd love our transportation policy lane leader to support me in.
Hey, I just flagged that for you. Doing my job.
I know when I was looking at this while working at the city of Portland, interstate commerce law also becomes a big element. So again, leading edge or bleeding edge. I don't know if Milwaukie is equipped to take that one on, and I'd love it for the state to take it on for us.
Always good to have somebody else, go first and have the lawsuits against them. So I happened on a conversation with some local business owners when I was downtown a couple weeks ago, but there was a fair amount of interest in this, implementing the tax on vacant properties. And I see there's no green there, it's all red and yellow, but that was, touted at one time as a way to incent the property owners in downtown Milwaukie to fill up the businesses, the space, because there's just so much vacant space in downtown Milwaukie. And so I was just wondering if you're aware of any cities that are successfully doing this, or any way to mitigate some of those red and yellow.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. We looked at this one really hard with Joseph, our community development director, because we agree, and it's something we hear a lot about wanting to incentivize filling up those spaces. We're encouraged by some of the latest developments we've seen with, as the URA sort of takes off, that seems to be moving in a good direction. We could not find any Oregon cities that had successfully done it. California has some.
Vancouver, BC.
Vancouver, BC. I think that what you see there is we would anticipate some lawsuits coming our way. Yeah.
So I had several comments, I guess. First off, I mean, I love this chart. I thought it was great. I do think that the potential revenue is way underestimated on short-term rental tax. And I think that's not going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, but might be $100,000. It certainly would be in the same ballpark of some of the things you are recommending. LOC is going to be issuing a report in early December based on a survey they did of cities and the short-term rental taxes. The problem with short-term rental taxes right now, it's as I understand it, it gets treated like a hotel tax. And so then it has to be spent on, it's limited, it can't go into general fund. Anyway, so it may not be as good a solution if that limitation stays on. I know LOC has prioritized trying to get that changed by the legislature this term. But Clackamas County did a 6% tax on unincorporated. So the people all around us, the Airbnbs are paying Clackamas County. We wouldn't be sort of breaking new ground there. So I do kind of feel like we should keep that one kind of in play. I had the same concern about, so 2 police chiefs ago, the police chief canceled using the van. Part of that was that the officer who was staffing the van was retiring, but also there was sort of this grumble against Milwaukie as a speed trap, as using photo enforcement as revenue stream. And now we're actually, and at that point, nobody was talking about it as a revenue stream. Now we're actually talking about it as a revenue stream. So all of that does give me some pause. I also, I think personally that we need to just bite the bullet and try for a permanent rate lift, permanent rate increase, because I don't like the idea of getting in every 5-year cycle. That's what I do feel is missing from this chart is a column on, duration of the measure and whether it has to be renewed and what's involved in renewing it, because that is a lift. Happy Valley's doing it. They're doing it for their police and they're doing it for their parks, but they're having to do it every 5 years. And that's not a burden I particularly want to put on all future city councils and, staff. So my inclination is to look at, it will not be easy. It will be a big lift to sell a permanent tax rate increase, but to me, that's the better solution. And I do think if we were to talk about a permanent rate increase to fund police and to fund library and to fund potentially parks, and that's another piece of this that I think, we have to be thinking about. If we implement photo radar and then we ask people to fund police, they're not going to be, a lot of people are not going to be very inclined to fund police. So I think we have to think about the way they,
What comes first?
How they interact.
how they interact. And then I guess that was it.
I do recall that when we had the photo radar the first time, that program started right at the same time that McLaughlin in front of Milwaukie had renovation. And at that point, Milwaukee asked to have the speed limit dropped from 45 to 30. So there were a lot of people that were used to speeding through Milwaukee at 45 that were getting caught by our photo radar. And I suspect that it's probably not at that same level of, of anger.
Sure. Chair Schachner, I just wanted to note that Counselor Kosarabadi has his hand up.
Okay.
So Counselor, if you'd like to speak.
Yes, hi, thank you. I appreciate that. Just a couple of questions. The one on the very bottom, the fee on big corporations. I see it mentions that it's high risk for legally viable, but also says that Portland is a city that's proven track record. So what would be the high risk legality behind the fee on big corporations if we were to model it similar to Portland and they have a proven track record? Just curious.
It's a great question.
I have another.
Oh, it's a great question. And Michael, tell me if I'm getting any of this wrong, but PDX, when they did, it was their Portland Clean Energy Fund. When they passed that, they did get many legal challenges. They have survived those. It is on, I can't recite the full design of the fund, but it's on major corporations, I think earning over $1 billion in revenue. And I think for our size city, we would have to scale it down. Like, I just don't think we have the size of corporations necessarily that Portland is able to capture. And so I think that we would assume there may be, the same nature of lawsuits they saw in Portland, or even, since it would be maybe on some smaller, large corporations, some risk there. But I take your point. I don't think it's it's not an unproven strategy, but it's definitely one that folks with funds would want to fight, if that makes sense.
I spoke with Justin about this and a couple others, and his caution was, you can't just do a tax on big corporations. There has to be a reason around it. And the example he gave was big box store tax. You can't just pick a grocery store and be like, hey, anything over this size, we're gonna, size in retail space, that you're going to start taxing it at a higher rate. The way that they get around that is by the big outlets like Walmart, Fred Meyer's, who are discount dealers. They're buying in bulk, so they're able to drive the prices down, which then in turn gets people shopping away from local stores. So the tax there is to recoup that balance, to kind of make it fair a little bit. But he hesitated in that you can't just draw a distinction on a corporation. I'm not a lawyer, I'm just trying to pass along some of the information I had on that. But that, I think, is part of the challenge, the legal challenge of this.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that. The other question, I just wanted to know that the luxury development tax, it says prohibited by statute, but when we brought this idea up, it wasn't necessarily a development tax. It was actually a luxury development sales tax. Because I remember we couldn't tax the development of property because we already have our CET funds, but taxing the sale of a new development, that was still up for discussion. Is that prohibited by state, that the sale of a new, the taxing the sale of a new luxury development? Or is that, or is this just specific to taxing the development itself and not the sale of it?
Thanks for the question, Counselor. Again, we are not the lawyers, but we did consult the lawyer on this one, and his advice to us was that it is both the development and the sale of real estate is prohibited by statute in Oregon. I can ask that he follow up with more details on that for you, but Michael, is that an accurate
That's
summation?
accurate. And the way he explained it to me is that's settled law in the state, and I think it's in the Constitution, so you cannot change it. But I'm not a lawyer.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I had some other questions, but if you all have follow-up, you go ahead.
You go. Yes, you haven't spoken yet.
Somebody turn off their.
Oh,
Thank you.
sorry.
As a follow-up on the big corporation tax, it's got $500 million in revenue here. That's just, I get that that's an estimate, but how many big corporations do we actually have that we could potentially capture? Like half a dozen?
That's I think, a big question. I mean, and again, don't quote me on how PSEP is designed. I know one way they're able to capture it is like the gas stations that operates, then you're getting the Chevrons and the Shells. But yeah, if you think about some of our larger corporations, it begs the question, do we want to be in? Anyway, yes, it's a good question that we could dig deeper into, but I think the reason you don't see it on our short list is just all the other red that you see in that row.
I think one way that I'm looking at this is instead of doing a big corporation tax, if we look at our business registration and business licensing, maybe we could structure this on a better tier level to maybe get a similar result in a different way. That's just an idea I've thought about, but yeah, different way of looking at it.
David?
Sure, yeah, I wanna echo Mayor Beatty's statement to a certain extent, or not to a certain extent, exactly what Mayor Beatty said regarding like a permanent cap raise, and just mention that this is again just my opinion, but we kind of have like, I feel like we kind of have like three categories here, which is cost recovery items, which, you know, as Councilor Massey said, are, you know, easier ones to implement. Then we have things that are probably potentially incurring legal challenges like the corporation tax or big business stuff. And then kind of the other area is stuff that's left to the voter. And I wanted to echo it in the sense of like, there's a lot of things, and this is again just my opinion, where the council will propose a tax or a fee. I remember there was a water environmental fee a couple of years ago that I remember had a pretty robust community comment section, to say the least. And you know, a lot of these things that maybe council approves are going to be deeply unpopular. And there's a lot of expenses right now that everyone's going through, and that I just want to say that like the property tax levy, cap raises, when you're leaving those kind of major things, which is really what we have to do to hit those 3 million marks. You know, we can do all we want for single occupancy tax for an Airbnb fee or whatever, but in the end, we've got 5-10 Airbnbs in all of Milwaukee. That leaving it up to the people does seem like a good idea. And if, you know, the will is rejecting it, then we have to incur costs and look at where the majority of the costs are. There's 40? Wow. Really? Wow.
But they're not all going to be very full.
Yeah, for
Summer, there are summer, I have two friends.
Microphone.
I mean, I have a friend who does Airbnb,
Yeah.
an ADU at her home, and, you know, I think it's
Oh, that's
largely
great.
a
Okay.
summer thing.
For
but-
some reason, I remember hearing a number somewhere that was like,
Well,
it was 3.
So there's a limited number of whole home
That might be, okay.
Airbnbs, because that, if you're doing your whole home, you have to go through planning department.
Got it.
And you
That
have to
might be
get a
what-
planning
okay.
approval, so
Yeah.
there's only a handful of those.
Yeah,
But if you're doing an ADU, or you're doing a
Yeah,
room, or
for
you're
sure.
doing, then
Okay.
you don't have all that.
Yeah,
And
that might
I
be-
went online today and just looked, and there was about 40.
gotcha. Okay, thank you. But yeah, I just wanted to say that, like, you know, we talk about these big expenses, and again, a $2 expense is a big expense to certain people, and, you know, property tax is hard, but it, you know, disproportionately impacts higher class individuals, and it's something that's left up to the people. So yeah, I think that would generally be a more popular avenue.
My biggest critic is my wife at home, who tells me this, so I am fully and well aware of it. It's just the trade-off of city services, what we need, and how do we pay for it?
All right, Counselor Anderson.
I do think we have to remember this is pre-Milwaukie Bay Park. So afterwards, we're going to see a lot more Airbnbs. Thank you, Robert. The thing that fortuitously, I was talking with my roommate about this really interesting work by T.R. Reid about how we do tax policy in the United States. And this work basically says if we want to do systemic changes, it's best to do it all at once, strip the Band-Aid off. And I think a lot, Member Chitazan, you were raising this point. The inequities in our taxing system, I think, are really profound. And when we see this kind of color-coded look at equity, it doesn't give us that full picture. And I think one thing I really want to see as we start to look at penciling some of these things out is what would the average tax burden be on a low-income Milwaukeean, on someone at the AMI, on someone beyond that? And not just dollar figures, but also in percent of their total income. And I think it's good and fine to talk about how these change that tax burden in the abstract. But I think this implicates our goal conversation too. It is a really, I want to acknowledge, challenging lift to say, how do we restructure our tax base as a city in the confines of our taxing authority? We can't go out for different revenue streams, yes. But I think it's a worthwhile goal if we're having this larger conversation. So as we progress, I just ask that we maybe see those numbers and ground it in that.
Such an excellent point. And I'm not seeing any more geese, so I might try to summarize some of the feedback that I think I've heard and where we go next. So what I'm taking away from this is the things we put on the list, we should continue to sharpen our pencil around. Again, that's not we're going to do all of these, because one of the big takeaways I have is you want us coming back with some strategic thinking and some option sets around what bundle or what sequence of moves would make sense and what the pros and cons of those might be, because some of the bigger moves on here, we might actually need to do without doing a lot of the smaller moves or vice versa. So we will do that thinking. Second is equitable design. I totally take your point. That column was a start, but a very poor start into sort of the true nuances of equity in these various things. So we need to take all of these through that equity lens. And I love your idea of coming back with real numbers or percent impacts on folks who are low AMI. The one that I heard to add back on the list for some further analysis is the potential short-term rental one, again, because I think I had not done my Airbnb sleuthing like the mayor had, and that's really intriguing to me. So I think with all of that, that's sort of our marching orders, and by our next meeting with you, which is February 10th, we come back with that more robust analysis and some actual recommendations around implementation for you to chew on. We won't pack as much into that meeting, I promise, so we can really talk a lot about this. We also know that any of this is going to require robust communication around it. The why, the what is at risk, the equity elements. So that's all in motion and a huge piece that we'll be bringing back as well. And Michael's going to end tonight talking a little about the quarterly. We only have the Q1 for you. You don't know a lot about your forecast after one quarter, but every quarter we're going to get smarter and smarter and smarter about that forecast, and we'll be able to see trends in revenue and expenditure. So we'll just have a clearer crystal ball about where we really need to go. Is that an okay summary? Is there anything I've forgotten that you want to make sure we take away from this conversation? Sophie?
I feel like I just want to add something, which I don't know exactly the appropriate way to say this, and I don't want to be alarmist or partisan or whatever, but like we have a new president who has a new administration that's not going to prioritize the same things that are part of Milwaukee's goals. And I wonder how that is going to both affect our budget and the longevity and stability of our city. And that makes me want to be well, let's get the $5 million revenue, not the 3, because especially when it comes to things like climate, I think we're going to have to be a little bit more independent in our resiliency and the way that we are like navigating inevitable changes in the next few years. So I don't know if there's a way to incorporate like changes in federal policy and funding into our outlook, but that feels like pretty important to me in making these considerations going forward. And like the climate piece feels the most like prescient and emotional to me. But like there's so many parts of Milwaukee that are so dear to me. And I think that council has really prioritized that. I don't want to see us like in a funding crisis because of the federal government's decisions.
Well said. And I'll note that our council will be setting new goals. We kind of kicked that process off last week, but I feel very encouraged by the council's commitment to, no matter what those new goals are, that the city's values carry forward in those. So points very well taken. Okay, I think Chair Schachner, and we can go to the last item.
Well, Michael, you're on.
I wanted to follow up on Mayor Beatty's point from earlier, her question for follow-up about SDCs. I have my own Google, Judy, back there, who went through and looked, and it says in here that the city shall make payment every 2 months and provide an accounting to the district for each transfer, and that the city shall retain 1% of the funds.
And
So
that's
that-
parks.
Part of our IGA.
That's part of our RGA.
Thank
So it's every 2 months. So thank you, Judy, for that.
Councilor Coster Abadi, I see your hand is up again.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on I believe the member's name is Sophie. I didn't catch their name. But they did, just to bring up on that point, whatever we can do to, cause it feels like the tax increase is where this is headed. Anything that we can do with these other options that we have to chip away at what that increase needs to be, because I along with that new incoming administration, things are probably more likely to get worse before they get any better. So I worry, obviously, of cost of living and things like that. And just keep in mind as we go through this, we do have an obligation and a responsibility to try to balance that out as best as we can and try to push as much as we can to support those individuals and those residents in Milwaukee that are going to be hurt most by this. So anything we can do to chip away at that to make it less of an impact. I understand where we are, but again, speaking action to our values.
All right. I'm going to move this right along since the hour. I'm going to go kind of quick. I emailed out all of the questions and I got feedback from David, but if you have any other questions on the quarterlies as we go through, email them to me, but I'll go quick here. This is a little joke that I had. Driving in the other day, I saw our revenue problems are solved by the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, which is directly on City Hall. So we've solved our revenue problems. And I just want to note, I was at a stop sign when I took this picture, so I was not moving. Yeah. So this is for an update for the first quarter of 2025, and that's ending September 30th, 2024. I just wanted to update you all. We are in audit season. Right now, our auditors are on site for field work. They started last week. They're with Moss Adams. They went last week and this week. They had been out earlier in August for field work. This time they're looking through our financials and doing all their testing. We are on track to issue by 12/31/2024, which is a huge goal that I had. In the past couple months or a couple of years, we've been into March, but thankfully there was no Gadsby pronouncements this year, so there was no additional lifts that we had to do. Major kudos to Matt Deeds, if he's still here, and Judy Serio, who really have done a lot of the heavy lifting on this. Matt has been in on weekends doing this work, and I appreciate that. It's putting this all together is a huge financial spreadsheet that makes your eyes go cross-eyed after a while. So I know we're getting to the end of it. We want to hand this off to Moss Adams by the end of the week so that then they can go through their review process and issue by 12/31. I just wanted to remind all the council too that I had sent out an email reminder a couple weeks ago. If you guys have any questions or concerns, to reach out to our partner with Moss Adams, Ashley Austin, directly. I've worked with her for plenty of years, and she's very reasonable and answers any questions, and you have a direct voice to her. So I just wanted to reiterate that. Our quarterly report, things that are on my radar, one we kind of talked about earlier is police overtime. Again, we went from 590 to 800,000 in our budget for this time. The police, I think, are down to 33 officers right now. We have one that came back to light duty recently, but I know that they're stretched thin. So overtime is something that I'm watching. It's expensive. Right now, it's in our radar, budget radar, but it could go up. It's just something that I'm going to continue to monitor and let you all know about. If you got a question, Will?
Does the police contract, well, I guess what's the balance that they get between time and a half and double time in their overtime payments?
I'm not an expert on that. If you send me an email, I can let you know.
You don't even have to send an email. We'll write it down and we'll follow back.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Or Matt, if he's still here, can add that to our list for follow-up. So that's just something we're continuing to watch. As Emma said earlier too, that we have a union contract, which we're very excited about. I believe that goes to council tomorrow night. I can share that the contract is a 6% COLA increase in year one, a 2% increase in year two, and then a mid-year on 12/31 additional 2% increase. So it is within the budget that we adopted in June. So we are budgeted for this. In looking at Q1 numbers, the COLA is not reflected in our numbers in Q1 because that starts on 12/13, and there's also a retro pay back to July 1st. All that will be in quarter two. So our quarter one numbers are trending where we projected, but in quarter two is going to be when we see the hit of this contract. Third is I also wanted to bring up Cheragino Farms. I learned something recently when the county called me and said, we need a resolution to start the property tax clock on Cheragino Farms. I'm not using the correct terminology, but much like we do when we do liquor tax or state gas tax and things, when we do the resolution as the budget committee at the beginning to accept those funds, we also need to do a resolution to accept those funds to start the county to start assessing those funds. I didn't realize that. So what I'm proposing is, well, I should take a step back. In the resolution from pre-2020, there was one that called up for, as Cheragino Farms came on, that we would ramp up our property tax scale over a 10-year period to get from 0 to 100. What I'm proposing is that we accelerate that percentage going forward so that we recoup and make ourselves whole on the money that we missed in the last fiscal year, to recoup that. So I'm using general.
Are you saying they have not been paying property tax?
They have not, because in the agreement, which
Holy
I can
cow.
bring up, in years 21, 22, 23, it was at 0. In year 24, they were supposed to be at 14.3. And then it gradually goes up from there to the end where in 2030, they're at 100%. What I'm proposing is if we change this so that in next year, 2025, we take the 14% from the previous year and the 28% that we're going into the next year, add those together to make up for it.
If I can just chime in here, because folks might be a little confused about this. So Cherokee Farms was a development that was built. The land was not in the city of Milwaukie limits. It was annexed into the city. And when that annexation agreement was made, this 10-year incremental plan was adopted. I think Michael's being really kind to kind of take the fall here, but Michael also is one of many finance directors that have been in place since that agreement was made. And this is being completely transparent. This was just something that was lost among that transition. And so it was when that call came to Michael, he came to me and daylighted this. And now Michael is working to fix that. But this is, something we wanted to be very transparent with you all as we're so closely monitoring the forecast for our property tax that he caught this and we'll be fixing it.
It does sound like we've only missed 1 year of actual money.
Correct.
I didn't remember that it was 3 years at 0. I thought it was like 10% a year over 10 years or something. I didn't realize it had 3 years.
What is the lost revenue that we're talking about? How much?
I don't have that 100%, but my estimate is around 200,000 to 250 is what the county was estimating.
And also, to be clear, since we've had a lot of conversation about police overtime, the union contract is the AFSCME union contract.
Correct.
And when is the police one due for negotiation?
Police was ratified in May.
Okay.
So the budget reflects accurate numbers and those employees have been paid at those rates.
All right, next slide. This is our FTE count. This is as of September 30th, so it's not 100% accurate. As Jen and Emma said, engineering is 100% fully staffed. So that's not represented in here, but that's a huge help. I know Public Works has been on a hiring spree. I really think that the police department is the one that continues to be behind. So this is something where we're working on getting the head count up, which is a good thing. I know that 11 FTE total there seems daunting, but it's gotten better as of today. Next slide. Just a quick fund summary. So the biggest change is in the general fund that fell 4.7 million. That is due to we don't receive our big majority of revenues until December, and that's property tax payments. We got recently a note from the county that our property tax payment is on schedule. I think it's between a 2.9 and 3.1% increase from the previous year. And we're expecting 11.4 million to come in from that between December and February of next year. So that will be a big influx of cash that we'll see in the next quarter. Also, transportation fund had a reduction in balance. That's because of all the work that they're doing, the Washington Street improvements, all of the transportation and CIP projects, they're starting to ramp up and you see those dollars going out the door. And the URA is the grant program that Joseph's working on to get that money out the door. So we're starting to see monies coming out of that as well. Next slide. This is just a brief summary on general fund revenues. Again, property taxes, we're getting those in December, so it looks very small then. The franchise fees and intergovernmentals, we're starting to get those in now. We haven't done accruals yet on these, which if we had more time, I would have loved to have put them in to show more apples to apples, but those will catch up in the next quarter. Other things, fines and forfeitures and license and permits are trending up above budget. And our investment earnings, we're continuing to see a higher rate of return than what we had budgeted, but those days are coming to an end as the Fed has, I believe, are cutting rates. Next slide. Expenditures were right on where our target is. You can see the 97% down at the bottom, so we're kind of where we are. The higher cost in public works was due to some parks projects that got delayed and got moved into fiscal year 25. Community development is still understaffed, a couple of positions. The police overtime, I already addressed. And the COLAs will come into this in quarter two. So I think starting in quarter two, we'll start seeing a more accurate picture of where we're at.
Why is library so low?
That is a great
42%?
question. I can follow up with that. Nothing comes to mind off the top of my head, but I'll let you know. Next slide. This is just kind of a summary of where we're going by line item. Personal services, we're right on at 95%. Again, we budgeted for the COLA increase, but we budgeted for those in contingency. So in February or middle of next year, we'll come back to you with a supplemental budget to bring those monies from contingency up into the wages, so it will still track for personal services. Materials and services is a little below. We're trying to keep those down as much as we can. I will say we front load some of our payments, so we pay for things at the beginning of the year. So that might be trending a little higher, but we are trying to watch our M&S budget. Capital outlays is going big. Again, that's because we're doing CIP projects and spending those dollars. And debt service payments come out in quarter two. So we'll start to see those going. Our 5-year forecast, this is extremely small, so I apologize, but it hasn't really changed since we adopted the budget. We're kind of where we are, where we're starting to go in year 3 into the red, and in year 4 we have fund balances. So nothing has changed from the budget we did in June and from when we talked in August.
This is the crystal ball. This is the crystal ball that will get clearer and clearer as we go further into the fiscal year.
So that's my quick synopsis on the quarterly. Two other business items I wanted to bring up is I put in my email on chair elections. We haven't done chair elections since 2021, and I think that's part of because turnover in my position that we haven't kept up on that. Typically in the past, we've done them every 2 years. There's no rule that says that it has to be every 2 years. It's kind of at your discretion of when you want to do it. My question that I wanted to propose to everyone is, do we want to do it and when? My suggestions would be we could do it at the next meeting in February if we want to do it, or wait till August, and that's the first meeting of the next biennium. So we go out and do our committee recruitments in spring, and new people, if there's any turnover on this committee, new members would start in August. So my only point to say is if we want to align it with the calendar, we would start that in August. But if we want to do it in February, it's all up to your decision.
I think it makes sense to do it in August, and I think that's what we put into the CUAB bylaws also, the first meeting in the first quarter of the year. So,
Okay. So, all right, with that, we'll set a schedule for August. The last thing I have is Leslie has directed me to Westland's website, and I passed that along to you all in an email for how they do their financial dashboard. And I really like it. It's a slick way to do it.
I love it. You can go down to all levels and every department and see exactly what the real stuff is. I'm just thrilled that we're going to do it, right?
Yes, so I did some research, and the vendor that does this works with our current Encode. And so it's a not hard lift, and it's not very much money. And West Lynn is already doing it and talking to our IT team that it's not much to do it. So I'm hoping around spring of next year that we can roll this out. To me, it's kind of a no-brainer because it adds to transparency. You can look at the dashboards, get all of the information, and it's pretty slick.
And kudos to Michael, who one of our goals in our strategic plan is working smarter together. And this was an example. And Leslie, our amazing chair. But this is one where we've spent a lot of money on budget software over the years. The city has that hasn't really panned out. And this is one where it's really not going to be that much money, and it's going to give us, I think, the tools and the functionality that we need.
Well, and not just us. Any citizen can go there and see what's happening with the budget. I mean, it's great.
That's all I had.
Okay. So.
Oh, we got one.
Well,
Now that we're in any other business, yeah?
yes, we're in any other business.
I hadn't considered it until you mentioned annexing the land for Cheragino Farms. What if we annexed more land to the city? Yes.
Very interesting concept, and one that I've heard from others, especially some council members. It's one topic that's part of the goal setting conversation for council. I think, and I'm not the expert on annexation, I think the question is how, right? It's what levers can a city pull to force properties to annex? But it's a very astute question.
Yeah, my understanding is in Oregon, the people coming in have to vote for it as well as us. In Texas, any city could annex up to 10% of its property as long as it was within the ETJ, and the people out there didn't have a voice. But in Oregon, they do. They have to agree to it.
What's an ETJ?
It's the extraterritorial jurisdiction, which in Texas is used so that the city can control the development of things that are going to be coming into the city in terms of water and street and whatever infrastructure. And so, it's a very useful tool as far as I can say. And if you don't mind, I will tell you a story. The city of San Antonio at one point extended its ETJ 3 miles out on every one of the major highways going out. So it looked like a spider, which allowed them to then bump their ETJ around all of those. And it was a fabulous plan because they didn't have to provide any services along the freeways. And the legislature subsequently made it illegal for any other city in Texas to do it, but San Antonio pulled it off.
I was just going to respond to William. I know that the question of annexation was a hot topic back, 20 years ago when I worked here and stuff. But at that time, as we looked at where we could annex, and kind of straighten out some of the boundaries, you have to also think that then we have to provide services, and what's the value and what are the property tax revenue potentials, because some of them aren't very high in a lot of the areas, or you have schools that aren't going to be paying the taxes. So it's not as necessarily as lucrative as it might first sound.
I mean, we do have some big parcels on our eastern border that are undeveloped, and if they develop, you know, I mean, I would like us to be more proactive about trying to get them in the way we did with Cheragino Farms. By bringing in Cheragino Farms, we actually created a little island out there between sort of Lake Road and North Clackamas Parks. And as I understand the law, when it's an island, you can actually annex it without a vote of the people. But otherwise, it's true, you have to go to a vote of people, and people just don't want to
Pay the
vote,
extra taxes.
pay the extra taxes, yeah.
And just curious on that, and I like Waverly Country Club is right on the border of us. Would it then like require, if they were annexed, the approval of the country club itself to come in? I have no idea. I'm just, yeah,
Owners, the
Got
property
it.
owners.
got it. Okay.
And I don't know, and.
I mean, I'm sure Waverly, I'm sure Waverly wants nothing to do with anything but them. I know the Garthwick neighborhood is definitely part of Milwaukie, so or part of Clackamas County. So I was just curious. Yeah. Okay. We give them their water, so, you know. What? Sorry. We charge them for their water and provide the water. Yeah, exactly. Sorry. You're right. Water's definitely not free here.
Did anybody else have anything that they want to raise in the forum? Okay, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn. And? A second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No.
Thank you, counselors online.